Applying the Noble Eightfold Path in life. Right thinking. Beyond positive thinking. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. We explore the second aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is regarded as the singular path to peace and liberation. The concept of a singular path should not only be understood literally as the only path or the most effective path, but also as the path that, when practiced and applied by the practitioner, will bring about mundane merit, liberation, and sainthood. The effectiveness of the Noble Eightfold Path helps practitioners transcend two lifestyles, one of indulgence in sensual pleasures, epitomized by marital sexual life, and the other of asceticism, where the body is subjected to hardships, leading to the loss of sensory pleasures. These extremes are often mistaken for the path to liberation. The Noble Eightfold Path helps us avoid these two extremes, aiding in the development of right vision and the application of right faith in proper thinking. We should not equate proper thinking with mature thinking as commonly understood in lay terms. Mature thinking involves deep contemplation, considering all aspects, before and after, inside and outside, self and social relations. A person with mature thinking is seen as someone who has grown up, who does not act impulsively, rashly, hastily, discontentedly, or give up midway. Mature thinking is only a small part of right thinking. Many examples of mature thinking lack the content of ethics and spirituality, merely fulfilling human merit. Millions of people with mature thinking are still superstitious, believing that God is the creator of humans, mountains, and the universe. On the other hand, we should not equate right thinking with positive thinking. Most positive thinking merely addresses situations, helping to release emotional blockages and clear obstacles. Positive thinking may involve reassuring oneself to overcome life's challenges, such as a person in a desert with only half a cup of water left, who thinks, "I'm lucky to still have water to avoid dying of thirst." In a similar situation, a pessimistic person might think, "My body is too large for this half cup of water to make any difference. Better not to drink at all." By not drinking, a person becomes exhausted from thirst, leading to many other negative consequences. A person who knows how to make the most of what they have with a content attitude, having no other choice after making an effort, is a positive thinker. They rejoice in what they have in the present. The half cup of water might partially restore their health, relax their muscles, and release mental tensions. This person feels comfortable. However, this positive thinking is not right thinking. It is merely a positive attitude from different perspectives, helping people handle difficult situations. The meaning of right thinking. What is right thinking? The word right in Pali is sama. Due to the limitations of expression in Vietnamese, maturity and positivity are only small parts of right thinking. The Pali Canon defines right thinking as all human thoughts and intentions that do not involve thoughts of attachment, thoughts of harm, and thoughts of delusion. According to Buddhist psychology, all afflictions leading to suffering directly stem from the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. When identifying that all obstacles arise from attitudes, psychology, and perceptions rooted in these three poisons, the question remains, how to overcome them? To overcome them, one should not align with them in any form. Human thinking is considered the director of actions. After practicing for a while, even with limitations, the level of progress and transformation in our consciousness will advance. Those who practice methodically can succeed in controlling speech and actions within a few years. This is the coarse aspect that calm individuals can easily overcome without much difficulty. Many people, without practicing Buddhism, can also demonstrate this through self-help books or by training their character to become more profound, capable of delaying emotional reactions, and thinking more carefully before deciding on any issue. Through diplomacy, we can achieve smiles, joy, and exuberance in the face of adversity. We do not speak words that are offensive or hurtful to others. Such individuals are still not considered to have right thinking, but merely exhibit skillful experience, the result of education, training themselves to win people's hearts. The ideas of harm may still be concealed within their consciousness, not yet expressed through specific actions. Such individuals may still be living with wrong thinking. Wrong thinking. Harm. The explosion of information technology challenges people with wrong thinking. Most violent movies tend to cause addiction in viewers. Youths often feel uninterested in films lacking these elements. When exposed to such films, seeds of violence are unconsciously absorbed. Others consciously receive them. Thus, the thinking that agrees with or reacts to the two character archetypes in violent movies leads viewers to live with wrong thinking, aligning with the elements of harm. Historical films that reconstruct past events such as World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the American Civil War, etc., often lead viewers to take sides, one in opposition to the other. People often call this righteousness and unrighteousness. When we agree with righteousness because they sacrificed for the homeland, if not trained in emotion, we will inevitably develop a sense of satisfaction, agreeing with the tragic deaths of enemies. This is wrong thinking. We are indirectly agreeing with the idea of killing. Today's video games are very sophisticated. Children are drawn to violent scenes of shooting, fighting, to become virtual snipers or fighters. Wrong thinking is inadvertently sowed in a very dangerous way. In the future, just a small disagreement or dissatisfaction could trigger the seeds of violent video games, turning them into an obsession, making children replicate those actions. Due to wrong thinking, they do not realize this. Western psychology allows the use of substitute objects to release hatred for someone disliked. By selling many effigies or allowing the drawing of images, they can then use sticks, knives, or other weapons to stab, chop, or slash the effigy or drawing. They feel like they are executing that person. Indians like to do this. Although Indians are considered to live harmoniously with nature and animals, opposing political parties during elections often bring effigies of opposing parties, shoot, kill, and burn to humiliate. Indian law allows this. Wrong thinking is very dangerous. Although no real life is ended, the action and thought of killing are still carried out, and the consequences of this negative action are enormous. We must clearly see that anyone who sows the seeds of wrong thinking about harm, even if no one is actually killed, will still face negative karma that shortens life or leads to premature death. Not to mention other negative impacts that could lead to bedridden illnesses or incurable diseases. Because the mind is always tense, the knife of harm is present in our hearts. The object of our hatred is not yet dead, but the person holding the knife in their heart is gradually dying over the years. Wrong thinking is the enemy of life. Some soldiers, while protecting the border, a noble act that helps others live and work in peace, are ready to sacrifice their lives. If they are not analyzed and trained, wrong thinking will appear daily. Wrong thinking about harm can become a driving force, making people no longer fear evil. Gunfire for ordinary people is a source of fear. For soldiers with wrong thinking about harm, it becomes a motivation to shoot. The smell of gunpowder, the smell of blood, death creates a strong source of hatred, pushing them forward to kill. Such wrong thinking drives people to extreme measures. Meanwhile, the righteous soldiers defending the borders, for a war of self-defense, are motivated by compassion, not wanting the enemy to sow the seeds of harm in our homeland, not wanting the innocent to die, not wanting injustice to prevail. They pull the trigger to stop the invaders' wrongful actions. Compassion results in merit. Pulling the trigger is an act of killing. The two karmas cancel each other out. The merit of the righteous soldiers, stemming from compassion, is greater than that of soldiers driven by hatred to kill. We see many generals who plan and order battles that result in the deaths of tens of thousands, but still live long lives. Because their mental state throughout the time of action did not stem from harm, from compassion and responsibility. Their karma of killing is still there, but it is offset by greater merit. Meanwhile, many people die prematurely despite their contribution. The difference lies in the motivation behind the killing. When the enemy falls, some soldiers have a habit of firing a few more shots. This act of killing one person, but with the intention to kill multiple times by shooting more, greatly increases the weight of the karma of killing. The negative consequences are extremely severe. Wrong thinking about harm brings many negative results. Vietnam has experienced many wars. If we do not deeply absorb the compassion of the Buddha, the resentment on the battlefield will cause rebirths many times, leading to eternal hatred. Resentment is difficult to untangle effectively if we do not transform the seeds of killing in our consciousness. Wrong thinking. Anger. Thinking rooted in anger can be expressed through behaviors like spitting, glaring, shouting, banging tables, pushing chairs, stomping feet, yelling, cursing, ordering beatings, or personally using weapons to injure the object. Wrong thinking based on anger is a major threat in all behavioral interaction. Many couples have personalities like water and fire. One says one thing, and the other reacts with 5 or 7 responses. The more educated they are, the more sophisticated their wordplay becomes. The less educated express themselves bluntly. Whether blunt or sophisticated, they leave pain in the listener and the speaker. Anger-based thinking is very dangerous. Many people die because they cannot release the pain caused by anger, carrying it like a grudge or resentment. External manifestations occur through 2 of the 8 types of suffering the Buddha mentioned: the suffering of association with the disliked and separation from the loved. The pain of associating with the disliked is shown when one has to see, interact with, live with, socialize with, and solve problems with someone they dislike, feel aversion to, or have prejudice against. This pain grows and cannot be resolved, leading to frustrations that, with just a small trigger, can turn ordinary anger into a serious problem. It is best to handle it by yielding, based on negotiation and compromise. Regarding interests, we negotiate peace. Regarding boundaries, we compromise so that each side is within a certain range. We should not cross the line, making the other person feel overly disrespected or unfairly treated. Each surge of anger in the mind leads to dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction can go in 2 directions. One direction is to raise great resolve, strong aspirations, so that in the future we do not fall into the same ruts or failures as those who came before us. This is positive dissatisfaction. Second direction is very dangerous, living in an idealistic, idolizing mindset but not achieving the standards we set. Frustration, discomfort, and resentment make us tired. Without transforming the emotions of wrong thinking, we become their victim. The result can be suicide or madness, becoming people who don't care, leading to self-destruction, personal crisis, and causing crises for others. The story of Qiwan is a historical lesson. Living in the context of a ruined country, with a king who only listened to slander, he was a loyal minister with a vision, a heart, a method, and a responsibility, but he was not trusted. In court sessions, King only heard the instigations of the bad people. His righteousness became a threat, leading to the king's disdain and scolding. Enraged, he left the country. After he left for a few months, a fierce war broke out between his country and neighboring countries. Hearing this, his heart was torn. Finally, he thought there was no point in holding on, and he kept comforting himself with the thought, "The world is corrupt, only I am pure. The world is drunk, only I am sober." His judgment in the historical context in which he lived was not wrong, but it was not the solution to the problem of anger-based thinking, threat that had taken hold of his soul. He met an old herdsman with a simple piece of advice. "Why don't you know how to use the clean water to drink, the soiled water to wash your face, and the dirty water to irrigate the fields? Every kind of water has its use. There's no need to discard it when it's not clean. You know you're clean. Others are not clean. There are still parts you can use. Therefore, there is no need to harbor anger that ruins your life." However, Qiwan did not listen to the herdsman. Due to his ego, he thought the herdsman was an ordinary person, not capable of advising him. Dissatisfied with the court, he returned to rural life but did not live comfortably. Tormented by adverse conditions, Qiwan couldn't endure it and decided to drown himself in the river on the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, known as the Dragon Boat Festival. Wrong thinking based on anger, even if it is justified, can lead to very serious consequences. It is still seen as an object for practitioners to transform. Even though there was dissatisfaction with the sight of soldiers gambling, cockfighting, and indulging, proclamation to the officers, with its heartfelt, earnest words, could still stir the heart of the most irresponsible person, reminding them of their duty to the country. Such dissatisfaction, though containing a bit of wrong thinking, was directed by right view to contribute and serve. We strive to improve positively. Wrong thinking is completely eliminated, and right view is still a supportive factor. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha said, "Where there is right view, there is right thinking." Thanks to right view, we have faith in the sun to forget the darkness, faith in the destination to forget the hardships of walking on unpaved, thorny roads. Positive thinking is the inevitable result of right view. Using wrong thinking based on anger makes us easily give up midway. Too angry to endure, we destroy and waste everything we have contributed. To achieve endurance, we must liberate wrong thinking based on anger. Life is very complicated. Sometimes, very simple things that many people know, but in a specific historical period, cannot be accomplished. Limited by laws, and those who hold power and policies may not have a broad or deep perspective, so rightful proposals are hardly heard. Frustrated with the situation, many people become discouraged and give up, not contributing. To overcome obstacles, Mahayana Sutras teach us to practice patience. Patience is often translated as endurance or tolerance. However, the term kshanti, forbearance, in Buddhist context is a positive attitude of patience, not just endurance as fate would have it. Kshanti includes facing adversity, interacting with difficult people, seeing and hearing things that are unpleasant, but handling them without allowing anger to arise, whether subtly or openly. One example of anger's harmful effects is the story in the Three Kingdoms of how Zhuge Liang devised a plan for Zhang Fei to defeat Cao Cao's army without losing a single arrow or spear. Zhuge Liang knew there was a giant fish, Jing, living under a large bridge, and Cao Cao's army would pass over it to battle Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei, who revered Zhuge Liang as a master, was ordered not to open the secret martial arts manual. Zhuge Liang gave him until he stood in the middle of the bridge. Zhang Fei obeyed the command. When he stood on the bridge and saw that Cao Cao's troops were many times his number, Zhang Fei opened the letter and found it was blank. The anger of a brave but reckless person made Zhang Fei let out a loud roar. The roar startled and enraged the giant fish, causing it to thrash about and break the bridge, leading to the collapse of the bridge and the death of Cao Cao's soldiers. This was Zhuge Liang's strategy. After winning the battle, Zhang Fei admired Zhuge Liang even more. The story gives the impression that Zhang Fei's roar of anger created a resonance with the anger of the giant fish, causing the bridge to collapse. This too is a consequence of anger. The opposing soldiers were killed without the use of weapons. This victory was based on anger. In reality, anger is often used in war, making the soldiers eager to reclaim independence and sovereignty for the nation. However, this is only a desperate choice. In most other situations, handling based on anger never yields good results. By chance, the situation was arranged by the strategic genius, Zhuge Liang. If it had been someone else, the outcome might not have been the same. Wrong thinking, superstition. Wrong thinking lacks understanding of causality or is based on superstition. Many Buddhists, after decades of going to the temple, still harbor thoughts like, "In my house I should worship the 9 heavens mysterious lady, the mother goddesses, Guangong, the kitchen gods, the god of wealth, the land gods." Even though on the day of taking refuge in the Triple Gem, they vowed, "I take refuge in the Buddha, not in deities or spirits." The Buddha does not want to hold a dominant role like in other religions. Here, we must understand why it is unnecessary to rely on God, deities, or spirits. Everyone in every species lives according to the law of cause and effect. If God and the deities exist, they too cannot escape the law of cause and effect. Why rely on them and fall into fatalism? Believe in causality and move forward without wasting energy on baseless beliefs. Longtime Buddhists who still worship deities in their homes are living with wrong thinking, not dealing with issues based on causality. This is extremely difficult. Many Buddhists console themselves that they worship extra, thinking that if one god is not effective, another might be. They fear that if they stop worshiping, their business might fail. This greedy belief gives superstition a place to thrive, like parasitic vines making a tree look beautiful, but gradually weakening it. Wrong thinking that lacks causality is very hard to abandon because we do not realize it is a threat to wisdom. Living with wrong thinking that lacks causality limits human wisdom. Buddhists must bravely shed the habits tied to Confucian customs to return to the wisdom of Buddhism. Many Buddhists travel to China and Taiwan, visiting souvenir shops selling a creature called the Pi Shu. This creature has a large belly, a big mouth, but no anus. Chinese believe that worshipping this creature will bring good fortune, as money flows into the house and does not flow out. This is logically flawed, contrary to science. Any creature or person who consumes but does not excrete will die. We have many parts to expel what we consume, including defecation, urination, sweating, and the death of cells. The process of impermanence creates life every second, every hour, every day, every month, every year, that we do not know. Baking in more does not mean more wealth. Having a lot of money but not doing charity. When dying with a stingy, miserly heart, it is hard to find peace, as one clings to material possession. The culture of the pea shoe is a culture of superstition, not based on causality. Some people worship the god of wealth to seek fortune. The god of wealth is usually worshipped in a standing position, with a statue about 1 meter tall, placed on an altar or in a corner of the house, not in the bedroom, as it is not a solemn place. If not worshipped properly, wealth may be lost. The Chinese have a deep belief in this superstition, thinking that the larger and more luxurious the statue, the more their merit will increase. They do not realize that the god of wealth cannot save himself, let alone others. At the end of 2008, we read a heartbreaking but highly philosophical news. A company producing terracotta statues of the god of wealth in Vietnam went bankrupt due to competition from Chinese porcelain statues. The quality of the company's statues was low, but the price was higher. As a result, the company was left with excess stock and went bankrupt. If the god of wealth had the power to bless, millions of statues produced should have made the owner rich, yet the company went bankrupt. The notion of wealth and prosperity, not based on causality, will lead to failure. Wrong thinking, greed. The global financial crisis lasted 18 months, from mid-2007 to January 2009. About 1 billion Chinese, 87 million Vietnamese, and hundreds of millions of people indirectly related to Chinese culture, such as Japanese, Thais, etc., prayed to the god of wealth, but it did not prevent the crisis. Despite unprecedented stimulus packages in human history, starting from the United States with over $800 billion and many other countries joining in dramatically, still could not be overcome. It required the intervention of international and national governments in financial activities. The foundation of the free market, driven by greed, led to mass production of cheap goods. Consumers were given the right to use and return within a certain period if not satisfied, without cost. This made consumers happy with producers and suppliers in the market. Everyone thought that consumption was secure for future payments, so everyone bought. Just having 10% of the house price allowed for installment payment. The pressure on the spiritual life of Westerners is very high. Each month, according to financial commitments with banks, they pay between $1,000 and $2,000. Depending on the financial agreement, just a few months of unemployment and a house paid off for 5 years with 2 years remaining can still be foreclosed. Many individuals driven by greed thought they could buy a house without concern for future liquidation and payment ability. As a result, the house was foreclosed by the bank. Banks, thinking they could profit by lending at high interest rates, also went bankrupt when individuals and debtors went bankrupt. Suddenly, land prices dropped to just over a third. We see that liquidity ability is the deciding factor. Yet banks in the real estate market, driven by greed, did not consider it. Thinking rooted in greed is wrong thinking, contrary to right thinking, leading to a real estate market crisis and the Wall Street stock market crisis, affecting the entire world. We see that solving problems not based on causality makes people greedy, yearning for this and that, with no positive outcome. For right thinking to be present, we must strive to live with causality, understand the impact, present causes with past causes, the impact of present conditions with present causes, the impact of present causes and conditions with the overall past sowings, and their results in the present and future. Analyzing issues of cause, condition, and effect in this way helps us find solutions to general problems. Solving problems with relatively stable results, not temporarily, prevents serious consequences. Understanding and applying causality is a very solid foundation for achieving right thinking. The development of greed, its peak being sensual desire, is wrong thinking. Thinking about marital sexuality is wrong thinking. The Pali scriptures clearly differentiate. Lay people practicing the Noble Eightfold Path only achieve mundane merit. Monastics practicing diligently achieve sainthood, because monastics are encouraged to transform sexual energy into compassion. Instead of caring for and serving a spouse and family, monastics serve all beings, offering to the Buddhas with a selfless heart. Monastics have fewer attachments to forms, sounds, scents, tastes, touches, and mental objects. Lay people, still living a marital life, even while practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, cannot attain liberation. Applying this formula to spiritual practices yields results. The theory of rebirth with karma is only an encouragement, not a reality. Wrong thinking about sensual pleasures, based on attachment, still exists. One cannot be reborn in the Pure Land. Patriarchs have taught clearly, attachment to desires prevents birth in samsara. Weak recitation prevents birth in the Pure Land. Attachment is the cause that entangles us in the cycle of birth and death. Ending attachment is the prerequisite for being born in the Pure Land. That is our aspiration. Lay people can be classified into 3 types. First, the celibate. Those who have never had a marital life, or whose spouse has passed away and have not remarried. Celibacy can be close to monastic life, but is not equivalent. As not being involved does not mean it has been transformed. Second, as age progresses, physiological activities nearly cease in women and become subtle in men. We do not pay attention to sexual activities, but they have not been transformed, thinking they are gone, but they are still subtly present as seeds. Third, still having a marital life, keeping the 5 precepts strictly, 1 spouse, 1 partner. In these 3 situations, the first and second may surpass the third but still cannot compare with monastic. The Buddha clearly differentiated. Lay people have limitations. Sensual happiness is the highest. Monastics live without boundaries, not satisfied with worldly happiness. They can aspire to become monastic. Lay people find it difficult to attain liberation. Lay people practicing the Noble Eightfold Path achieve human and heavenly merit, understand the Dharma, and are born in periods close to the Buddha, with opportunities to live in peace and happiness, without needing liberation. For liberation, they must become monastic. Thinking about marital sexuality never becomes saintly. Contemplation plays an important role, and images are the main objects of contemplation. In the Tibetan Buddhist schools, we see images of the Buddha and female deities engaged in intercourse, both seated on a lotus. Tibetan Buddhism explains that the Buddha in this posture symbolizes compassion, and the female deity represents wisdom. The union of compassion and wisdom brings about the highest level of spiritual practice. This image of contemplation is considered special and is revered by most tantric practitioners for practice. The essence of contemplation, if positive, gives us a certain spiritual content. If negative, it becomes an obsession. Wrong thinking is defined in the Pali Canon as thinking about sexuality, thinking about harm, thinking about anger, and thinking not based on causality. Contemplating an image of intercourse is wrong thinking. Regardless of how it is explained, it is still wrong thinking and cannot become right thinking. As a result, nearly all Tibetan Buddhist schools allow monks to marry. Only the Gelugpa school of His Holiness the Dalai Lama adheres to the traditional monastic life as taught by the Buddha, where monks live celibate lives. The Buddha is the only one in human history who clearly saw the harm of sexual life for monastic. The Buddha taught methods to transform, helping us avoid psychological repression, becoming a true saint. Other religions do not concern themselves with this issue. Monastics are allowed to marry. Even in the Christian Bible it is not prohibited. The Buddha saw clearly that the entanglement in birth and death is tied to attachment. Thinking rooted in attachment is wrong thinking. Lay people living a marital life still live with wrong thinking to the extent of attachment. This is the difference between Buddhism and other religions. Another explanation for Tibetan Buddhism is that when monastic life became secularized, monks began to marry, and they had to find many reasons to justify it. During that period, they created many new tantric scriptures, including one stating that Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara played the role of a layperson with a wife and children, and still attained enlightenment. This was essentially a justification for married monks. Combining compassion and wisdom, we do not need to use images for contemplation. The Buddha said, when milk is mixed with water, the boundary cannot be determined. Or, when canals, streams, lakes connect with rivers, and rivers merge with the sea, there is no boundary between the sea and the river. Only the salty taste of the sea remains. We have hundreds of other images to describe the harmony between compassion and wisdom. There is no need to use images of wrong thinking about attachment in intercourse. Intercourse images cannot lead to wisdom, liberation. The consequences will inevitably occur. Tibetan Buddhism has contributed significantly to the world by spreading the tradition of reincarnation. The West came to know Buddhism through this. Secularization is something the West highly favors. This explains why they accept Tibetan Buddhism more than other forms of Buddhism, because Western culture is based on attachment. They see attachment as normal. They express it everywhere, and it is not seen as wrong in their culture. The secular activities of Tibetan Buddhism have been quickly accepted by the Western world. Based on the traditional Noble Eightfold Path, it is still considered wrong thinking. Practitioners have no opportunity to progress far on the spiritual path. In conclusion, the four contents of wrong thinking that need to be transformed by Buddhist practitioners include thinking about killing, thinking about anger, thinking about delusion, and thinking about attachment. Anyone who strives to eliminate all four wrong thoughts, considered to have right thinking. Right thinking here is not just positive thinking, mature thinking or correct thinking according to induction, synthesis, deduction, analogy, etc., but also transcendent thinking, worthy of our practice, leading to peace and liberation in life.
Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism, the best channel for sharing knowledge about Buddhism. Today, we will talk about the topic, craving is suffering. In Buddhist teachings, craving is often identified as the root cause of all suffering. Whether it is the desire for material possessions, comfort, respect, or fame, these cravings bind us to the cycle of samsara, the endless loop of birth, death, and rebirth. When we crave, we become attached, and this attachment leads to dissatisfaction and suffering. As Nagarjuna wisely pointed out, actions driven by greed, hatred, and delusion are non-virtuous and accumulate negative karma, perpetuating our suffering. So let's delve deeper into understanding how craving manifests in our lives and the profound ways it impacts our journey towards true peace and enlightenment. Craving is suffering. Not pursuing craving is the practice of Dharma. Pursuing craving is not practicing Dharma. The matter is as simple as that. The entire essential meaning of opening the doors of the holy Dharma, these teachings coming from the golden mouths of the Kadampa Geshes, what they have practiced and realized is to cut off the 8 worldly concerns, to free oneself from the craving attachment to this life. Whether you practice Dharma or not, the evil thought of the 8 worldly concerns is the source of all obstacles and problems. All undesirable things arise from thoughts of these 8 worldly concerns. When you are told to renounce craving, you feel as if you are being told to sacrifice your happiness. You renounce craving, and then you are unhappy and have nothing left. Just you. Your craving is confiscated, your happiness is stolen, and you feel empty, like a deflated ball. You feel as if your heart is no longer in your body, as if you have lost your life. That is because you do not understand the faults of craving. You do not realize that the nature of craving is suffering. Craving itself is a suffering, sick mind. Because of craving, the mind generates delusions, and you cannot recognize that there is another happiness, a true happiness. For instance, when craving an object and enjoying it, you label this experience as happiness. It appears to you as happiness, but in reality, it is only suffering. When you keep performing actions such as eating, your happiness does not increase, but only decreases. When your stomach is full, your happiness turns into suffering. Before you realize the suffering nature of the action, it seems to be happiness, but when you recognize it, it becomes suffering. When suffering is not recognized, the feeling is labeled as pleasure and appears as pleasure. But as you continue the action, the feeling gradually turns into suffering. The peace you experience by renouncing craving leads you to nirvana, the state of no afflictions. This peace, the absence of craving, allows you to fully develop and achieve enlightenment. You can permanently experience this peace. From the first time you free yourself from thoughts of worldly concerns, from craving, you begin to develop this peace in the continuum of your mind, and eventually, you experience it permanently. If you feel that by sacrificing craving, you are sacrificing your happiness and are left with nothing, remember that all your problems are based on craving and thoughts of worldly concerns. Not knowing that the nature of craving is suffering, you cannot recognize that there is a better happiness. You cannot realize that by sacrificing thoughts of worldly concerns, by liberating your mind from craving, you have true peace, real happiness. This happiness does not depend on any external sensory object. It is developed within your own mind. With your mind, you can develop this peace. For instance, if you have a skin disease that makes you itchy, to soothe the itch, you scratch so much that you end up in pain. Rather than labeling the relief from itching that scratching brings as pleasure, isn't it better to have no illness at all? Isn't it better to renounce the illness? Having craving is like having this skin disease. Without craving, there would be no cause for all problems arising from craving. There would be no progression. If we did not have this body, this samsara, created by delusion and karma, and polluted by the seeds of delusion, we would not have to experience heat and cold, hunger and thirst, and all other problems. We would not have to worry about our existence or spend so much time and money caring for our bodies. We are busy just to maintain this body to look good. From head to toe, we make a lot of effort to decorate this body. We waste our precious human life in doing that. However, when you are sick, even taking medicine cannot always cure you. Therefore, isn't it better not to have this body, this samsara? Then you would not have to experience all these problems. Without craving, you would have a lot of peace in your mind, a peace that can be developed and perfected. This work has an end. Seeking samsaric pleasure by relying on external objects of craving is an endless task. No matter how much work you do toward that end, it never finishes. Like the waves in the ocean appearing one after another, that work never ceases. First, temporary happiness, which is dependent on external sensory objects, has the nature of suffering. And secondly, no matter what you do, there is no way to end the work aimed at achieving temporary happiness. Less craving, less suffering, as Nagarjuna taught in a verse often recited by Dramtumpa. Gain or loss, pleasure or pain, praise or blame, fame or disgrace. These 8 worldly concerns are not the objects of our mind. For us, they are all the same. It is easy to understand how loss, suffering, hearing unpleasant sounds, disgrace, infamy, and criticism, blame, can become problems. These things are commonly considered to be problems. But you may not realize that gaining, achievement, happiness, hearing pleasant sounds, fame, and praise are also problems. However, they are entirely the same. They are entirely problems. But the objects themselves are not the problem. Wealth is not the problem. So what is the problem? The problem is the mind of craving and attachment to wealth. That is the problem. Having a friend is not a problem. The mind's attachment to friends makes having a friend a problem. Craving makes possessing these 4 things, material wealth, comfort, pleasant sounds, and praise, into a problem. If there is no craving, no worldly concern, then having or not having these objects does not become a problem. Maybe one night when you are sleeping comfortably, you are suddenly disturbed by a mosquito bite. If you have strong worldly concern, intense craving for comfort, you will be very upset by the mosquito bite. Just because of one mosquito bite. This is not dangerous, it cannot cause a serious illness. The mosquito only sucks a tiny drop of blood from your body. But when you see the mosquito's body filled with your blood, you are shocked. You become angry at the mosquito and uncomfortable all night. The next day, you complain about the mosquito all day long. Last night I lost many hours of sleep. Losing sleep for one night or even a few hours is like losing a precious gem. You are as upset as someone who lost $1 million. For some people, even such a small problem becomes huge. There are also people who crave praise and respect from others. If you do not pay attention to them and lift your face when passing by, or say 1 or 2 disrespectful words that they do not expect to hear, it causes tremendous suffering in their hearts. Or if you give them something in a disrespectful manner, whether intentionally or not, it also causes great suffering. For those who have too many expectations, too much attachment, even the pain from a small physical act they do not like becomes huge. It feels like an arrow has been shot into their heart. Suddenly, anger arises intensely. Suddenly, their body becomes very tense. Their face, previously serene and peaceful, now becomes almost terrifying, puffing up, their ears and nose turning red and blood vessels standing out on their forehead. Suddenly, their entire disposition becomes extremely rude and unpleasant. The more a person desires praise and respect, the greater the suffering in their heart when they do not receive them. The other objects of craving are similar. The more one craves material possessions, comfort, happiness, pleasant sounds, and praise, the more they suffer when they experience the opposite. If you hope that a friend will always be cheerful, smiling, respectful, kind, and always do what you want, but one day they unexpectedly do something small against your wishes, that tiny thing causes incredible pain in your heart. All of this relates to worldly concern, to having too strong a desire for something. The less craving you have for the 4 desirable objects, the fewer problems you will encounter when facing the 4 undesirable objects. Less craving means less suffering. If you cut off attachment to this life, you will not suffer when you experience criticism or do not receive something because you are not attached to praise or receiving things. Similarly, when you are not attached to expecting your friends to always be kind to you, always smile at you, and always help you when you ask, you do not suffer when those friends change and do the opposite of what you want. Your heart does not hurt. Your mind remains calm and peaceful. By cutting off attachment to the 4 desirable objects, you do not have problems when the 4 undesirable situations arise. They do not hurt you. They cannot disturb your mind. The thought of worldly concerns clings to the 4 desirable objects of this life. Without this thought, your mind is very calm and peaceful so that you are not disturbed when encountering the 4 undesirable things. And encountering the 4 desirable objects does not disturb you either. If someone praises you, it does not matter. If someone criticizes you, it cannot disturb your mind. Your life is stable and your mind is peaceful. There are no ups and downs. This levels out the 8 worldly concerns. How do you keep your mind peaceful when problems arise? How do you protect your mind so that experiencing the 4 undesirable things does not disturb you? It is by recognizing that attachment to the 4 desirable objects is the problem. You must realize the faults of the 4 desirable objects and abandon attachment to them. This is fundamental psychology. If you use this method, undesirable situations will not disturb you. Geshe Chengawa balanced the 8 worldly concerns by reciting this verse. Happiness when life is comfortable and suffering when it is troublesome. All activities aimed at the happiness of this life should be abandoned like poison. Virtue and non-virtue are just functions of the mind. Cut off non-virtuous motivations as well as motivations that are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. The last line refers to actions of the body and speech with unclear motivations. These actions are called unpredictable actions. The best way to train our mind is to expect the 4 undesirable objects more than the 4 desirable ones. Expect criticism and disrespect. Practicing this renunciation, which cuts off craving, is optimal psychology. When you have trained your mind to expect undesirable things, when the undesirable actually happens, it does not become a shock for you. It does not hurt you because you are expecting it. Before understanding the Dharma, before practicing meditation, you viewed troubles, suffering, unpleasant sounds, criticism, and loss as unwanted problems. Now, if you thoroughly examine the nature of attachment to material things, comfort, pleasant sounds, and praise, you will not see it as happiness. You will see that it is also suffering. It is not the happiness you thought it was before understanding the Dharma. It is not peaceful. It is suffering. The mind is stuck to the object of craving. When you receive praise, you are so smart. You speak so well. You understand the Dharma deeply. Your mind is stuck in the praise and is no longer free. Like a body chained tightly, the mind is tied by attachment. The mind is stuck like glue to an object, or like a moth flying into a melting candle. Its entire body, wings, and limbs are completely soaked in the candle wax. The body and limbs of the moth are so fragile that it is extremely difficult to remove them from the wax. Or like a fly stuck in a spider web. Its limbs are tightly wrapped in the web, and removing them from it is very difficult. Or like ants in honey, Attachment is the mind being stuck to an object. Craving is the source of all problems. As Lama Atisha mentioned in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, we pursue with the hope of satisfaction, but the pursuit of craving only leads to dissatisfaction. In reality, the result of pursuing craving is only dissatisfaction. You continuously strive but only experience dissatisfaction. Pursuing craving and not achieving satisfaction is the main problem of samsara. For example, having cancer or AIDS is not the main problem. Compared to the problem of pursuing craving and not being satisfied, cancer and AIDS are nothing. They do not continue from life to life. While you have a perfect human life, if you do nothing about the problem of craving in this life, it will continue from life to life. The continuous pursuit of craving binds you to samsara, causing you to experience the sufferings of the 6 realms constantly, endlessly. If you do not stop pursuing craving, there is no true satisfaction, no real peace. Pursuing craving only leads to dissatisfaction and endless experiences of the sufferings of samsara in one of the 6 realms. The thought of the 8 worldly concerns continuously brings all the illnesses that terrify us. Continuously from life to life, it brings all the serious problems that a human can experience. It creates karma for us to continuously experience these problems. The thought of the 8 worldly concerns, the craving attachment to this life, is the most serious disease. Compared to worldly problems, other problems are nothing. If you do not have the thought of the 8 worldly concerns, which binds you to samsara, even if someone kills you, all you do is transition to another body. Your consciousness takes another perfect human body or goes to a pure realm. Being killed serves as a condition for transitioning to another body. But if you have the thought of the 8 worldly concerns and do not practice dharma, even if no one kills you and you live to be 100 years old, you constantly use your precious human body to create the causes of the lower realms. You use your fortunate rebirth to cause the conditions for unfortunate rebirths with no opportunity to practice dharma. The longer you live, the more negative karma you create, leading you to live in the lower realms and experience suffering for many lifetimes. Therefore, the thought of the 8 worldly concerns is far more harmful than an enemy who simply kills you. Lama Tsongkhapa's quote on the pursuit of craving continues. Craving brings many other problems. By pursuing craving, the mind becomes coarse and unpeaceful. Hundreds of problems arise from dissatisfaction. When craving is strong, it is easy to become angry, for example. The stronger the attachment, the more intense the anger that arises. If you do not have strong attachment, you do not get very angry when someone annoys you. You might still be upset, but less than before. Anger, jealousy, etc. arise in relation to attachment. Due to attachment, these other negative thoughts appear. When any of these negative thoughts appear, you create negative karma, the cause of the lower realms. When your mind is overwhelmed by craving, completely polluted by craving, you cannot meditate. Even if you have some understanding of emptiness, for instance, it is difficult to have any experience of it. When your mind is calm and peaceful, you may have some experience of it. But when your mind is polluted, a thick fog covers everything, and you cannot meditate on emptiness. Furthermore, you cannot think about the faults of craving. When you strongly crave an object, you become very miserable if you cannot be near it. You cannot be calm. Your body does not rest because your mind is not at ease. Since your mind is not at ease due to craving, even if you have no particularly hard work to do, you have no physical comfort or relaxation. There are many examples of the faults of craving. Think of alcoholics and drug addicts. Their lives become miserable, decadent, to the point where they cannot do anything. Moreover, they damage their awareness and memory. Illnesses come from the dissatisfied mind of craving, the evil thought of worldly concerns, because dissatisfaction creates the conditions for illness. Then you suffer from illness for many years, with enormous unwanted expenses amounting to thousands of dollars. When you cannot earn money properly, you may resort to stealing. Your mind becomes chaotic. You become mentally and physically exhausted, and may even end up in a hospice. And what is the root of all this? It is a moment of uncontrollable craving. That moment when you do not protect yourself from the thought of the 8 worldly concerns, when you do not practice dharma, brings many problems. The problems continue year after year, costing you a lot of money and making your life unnecessarily complicated and difficult. All this anxiety and expense are due to the thought of the 8 worldly concerns. If from the beginning you protected yourself from attachment to worldly concerns, all those years of unwanted problems and expenses would not have occurred. You would never have to experience them. It is clear that this is the source of AIDS, which appears when a person is driven by the 8 worldly concerns. When I asked people infected with AIDS through sexual activity about their mental state when they began experiencing symptoms, some said it was an extremely strong sexual craving. During the period of that immoral mental state, each day they began to experience fever, sweating, and weakness. Fundamentally, all illnesses, including AIDS and cancer, arise from the thought of the 8 worldly concerns. Relationship problems are similar. In one way or another, if we do not exert some control, relationship problems can continue. Life becomes hell. Before even reaching the real hell, we experience hell in a human body. There is hell everywhere. You feel completely trapped, suffocating. You cannot even breathe. When your craving is not met, when you do not get what you want, that is when nervous breakdowns and suicidal thoughts occur. Recently, someone studying Dharma in Switzerland had such problems and committed suicide. He hanged himself. I think he had heard some Dharma teachings but had not practiced or done retreats much. He had a very good job, earning a lot of money, but he had relationship problems. Because of such problems, you may have experienced suicidal thoughts about ending your life many times. Fundamentally, this is a fault of the worldly craving mind. Geshe Kadampa Gonpawa, who had clairvoyance and many other realizations, said, "If we receive the 4 desirable results of comfort, material wealth, good reputation, and praise from an action performed with the thought of the 8 worldly concerns, it is only a result in this life and has no benefit in future lives. And if that action brings the 4 undesirable results, we gain no benefit even in this life. In any case, actions performed with the thought of the 8 worldly concerns that bring the 4 desirable results will ultimately lead to the 4 undesirable results. For example, in business, you may achieve one success after another. Due to that success, you act more and more with the thought of the 8 worldly concerns. After some time, the karma of your success is exhausted, and the karma of failure is experienced. In just one day, you can become a beggar. One day you are a billionaire. The next day, you do not know how to pay rent or feed your family. Your whole life collapses. This is because you acted with the thought of the 8 worldly concerns. Although you achieved material comfort, you are not satisfied and continue to act with worldly thoughts. Due to your past success, one day the karma of your success is exhausted, and everything collapses. The person who was wealthy yesterday, without financial worries, suddenly today worries even about caring for the family. He does not know what to do and cannot eat or sleep. Even if you succeed in stealing once, twice, or 3 times, for example, your success cannot continue indefinitely. You need to control your craving. You need to feel satisfied. Otherwise, if you continue to steal, one day you will surely be caught. No matter what the mistake is, by continually repeating it, one day it will certainly become a big problem. Another fault of craving is that it ultimately leads to many undesirable things. Freeing yourself from craving is a great protection. Cutting attachment to an object or person means other negative thoughts do not arise, and you do not create negative karma as a result. It provides incredible protection. Typically, by being attached to a specific object, you create much negative karma in relation to many other beings. By cutting attachment, you prevent the causes of the lower realms. Great peace arises when you free yourself from the thought of craving. Focus on this true peace that you can immediately experience by freeing yourself from craving. When you focus on this, there is no problem. When you strive for this great happiness, this true peace, temporary happiness becomes insignificant and not too difficult to abandon, perhaps as satisfying as picking up used toilet paper. If you are mindful of this, you are not at risk of becoming desperate or insane. Thus, no matter how many problems we encounter, we have no choice but to practice Dharma. And practicing Dharma means mastering our mind, mastering craving. Forget about living an ascetic life of pure Dharma practice. At the very least, we need to master craving for inner peace and happiness in this life, and to prevent the development of problems. Ending samsara. As Nagarjuna said, actions arising from greed, hatred, and delusion are non-virtuous. Actions arising from non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion are virtuous. Whether virtuous or non-virtuous, actions are accumulated by the mind. As long as we desire comfort, material wealth, respect, and fame, and as long as we want to avoid suffering, loss, disrespect, and infamy, all actions are driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. Therefore, these actions are more likely to be non-virtuous rather than virtuous. The text says, "It is extremely important not to develop the desire for the happiness of this life. If this desire arises, make efforts to abandon it." Lama Atisha also said, "If the root is poisonous, the branches and leaves are also poisonous. If the root can cure illness, the branches and leaves can also cure illness." Similarly, all actions done with greed, hatred, and delusion are non-virtuous. In other words, any activity, whether farming, business, fighting, helping friends and relatives, or meditating, done with the thought of the 8 worldly concerns, attachment to this life, and driven by greed, hatred, or delusion, will become, as stated here, only the cause of samsara and the lower realms. The text continues, "To obtain the essence, from the very beginning, we should not be attached to this life." Obtaining the essence refers to this precious human body. Then comes a quote from a Vajrayana teaching, often given as motivation during the preparation for a Vajrayana initiation. "Those with great devotion, who strive to transcend samsara, are permitted to enter the mandala. We should not desire the results of this life. This means that we should not seek happiness, pleasure, material wealth, respect, fame, etc., which all belong to this life." The quote continues, "Those who desire this life do not achieve the transcendent meaning of samsara. This means that the activities of those who desire this life will not become the cause of enlightenment, the state beyond samsara." You can understand it this way. If your goal is only to achieve happiness in this life, if that is your sole hope, everything you do, work, reciting prayers, receiving initiations, eating, sleeping, does not become holy dharma. All those actions are non-virtuous. Your hope is for happiness, but the only thing you receive from these actions is suffering. Although you work with the aim of achieving happiness in this life, your actions actually become obstacles to this happiness and prevent you from finding it. We can clearly understand this if we look at our own experiences and those of others. The quote concludes, "Striving to transcend samsara will develop the happiness of samsara in this life." This means that those who seek only enlightenment beyond samsara and practice dharma to achieve it, even though they do not seek the happiness of this life, they will find it naturally. In the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna said, "If your hair or clothes catch fire, you immediately put it out." Likewise, making an effort to avoid rebirth is very worthwhile. When a spark falls on you, you get rid of it without delay. You react instantly, even though the spark might only burn your hair or clothes. Surely, you should be more intense in your effort to eliminate the causes of rebirth in the lower realms and the continuous sufferings of cyclic existence. All our problems arise because we take on this samsaric rebirth, these aggregates created by delusion and karma and polluted by the seeds of delusions. Because we take on rebirth, we experience the pervasive suffering of compounded phenomena, and thus experience the suffering of change and the suffering of suffering. We not only experience the sufferings of this life, but this current samsara becomes the foundation for all samsara and sufferings of future lives. Taking on one samsaric existence creates the cause for many more samsaric existences in future lives. This process continues endlessly. Nagarjuna is saying that compared to a small spark falling on us, this situation is much more serious, and we should strive not to take on another rebirth. How can we strive not to take on rebirth? As mentioned in the teachings, craving is the chain that binds us to samsara. Craving is the nearest cause of the next life's samsara. Craving not only causes us to create negative karma now in this life, but when we recognize that we are dying, we cling to our body, our aggregates. Craving and clinging at the moment of death lead us to take on a particular samsaric rebirth in the next life. Because craving is the main cause of samsara, cutting off craving becomes the essential dharma practice to avoid rebirth again. This is the way to end the continuity of samsara. In summary, every Dharma practitioner should abandon the desire for the comforts of this life. Unless you abandon this desire, even being called a Dharma practitioner is not possible. Anything done with the desire for the pleasures of this life is not Dharma. As long as there is craving, there is no Dharma practice. There is a Tibetan proverb, since a horse does not have the qualities of a lion, do not call a horse a lion. Lama Gyalpa, a Kadampa Geshe, said, "Abandoning this life is the beginning of Dharma. You have done no Dharma practice and feel proud to be called a Dharma practitioner. That is madness. Check whether the continuum of your mind includes the first step of Dharma, abandoning this life. Even if you think you are not a religious person, because you want happiness and do not want problems, you must control craving. There is no other solution. You cannot reduce craving and other delusions by taking medicine, undergoing surgery, or using external means. The method to practice is to reflect on the faults of craving and think that life is short. This is essential psychology, even if you are not a Buddhist and do not want to be a Buddhist. There is no other solution. To encounter fewer problems in your life, you must reflect on the faults of craving. If craving is eradicated, there are no more problems. As soon as you abandon craving, you will not see any problems anymore. Practicing bodhicitta helps control craving. Exchanging yourself with others, which means abandoning yourself and loving others, or having an extremely kind heart, wanting to eliminate the suffering of others and take on their happiness, solves many problems. Those whose minds are not strong enough to practice bodhicitta should prevent the problems of craving by reflecting on meditations such as precious human rebirth and especially impermanence and death. You can cut craving by remembering that life is short and death can occur at any moment, and by connecting these thoughts with the lower realms, karma, etc. As I mentioned before, Shantideva's secrets of the mind are not advanced realizations. Understanding the faults of the 8 worldly concerns and reflecting on impermanence and death can also be considered secrets of the mind. Meditating on impermanence and death and recognizing the faults of craving, meaning recognizing that all problems arise from it, gives you the strength to decide to abandon this life, to cut off attachment to this life. These 2 practices make you more resolute and weaken worldly concerns. They give you the strength to cut attachment to this life, to free yourself from craving. If you do not recognize these secrets of the mind, although you want happiness and do not want suffering, you will experience the opposite. Without temporary and ultimate happiness, you will wander in samsara and continually experience suffering. But if you recognize these secrets of the mind, the ultimate meaning of Dharma, you can achieve happiness and eliminate suffering and will no longer wander aimlessly in samsara. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who might benefit from it. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button, follow, and turn on the notification bell. This is how you can show your support for me. Once again, thank you very much, and see you in the next videos.